I don't know at what point I didn't hear the beep. So I don't know at what point I lost you. I apologize. I just completely apologize. I didn't hear the beep go off. I got so wound up, I didn't hear the beep. The beep. And I hope that you, I looked at the clock and I said, well, it's going on a bit late. So I guess I'm only going to be able to do 5 programs today because I have to have this room back by 3:15. Get this room out, it's now around 2:45, so I guess I'd like to do a 6th program, but I don't think it's going to be possible. So I will quit at 3:15, I'll do 5, and that will finish up Mexico today, and I will try to do some more tomorrow then, or the next day, and then we'll start uploading. But when last I was here, the last presentation, I was explaining Pope Pius XI's regret as to what had happened with the agreement in 1932. He issued an encyclical letter explaining that the promises were not kept. He believed it was important to keep to make some resolution because of the loss of the sacraments, but that as a consequence, he said that the situation has worsened and the promises were not kept, and that indeed religious instruction is not only forbidden but in primary schools, but not infrequently attempts are made to induce those whose duty it is to educate the future generation to become purveyors of irreligious and immoral teachings, which could describe our own situation today. Now, the purpose of going over this is to indicate that as communism had taken over Russia in 1917, at that same time, the eras of Russia, which are really the anti-incarnational eras of modernity, were being spread around the world, and they're spread here. And anyone who thinks that Our Lady's Fatima message has been fulfilled, or that the age of Mary has passed, is an idiot, in plain terms. Idiot. I-D-I-O-T, idiot. Fool. The errors of Russia have not spread. Yes, Pope Pius XI issued his mea culpa about the Cristeros. Yes, he defended the faith as best he could in his encyclical letters, and he did a great defender of Christ the King. He defended marriage, opposed Nazism, opposed communism. But he didn't do the one thing that could have prevented World War II. He didn't fulfill Our Lady's Fatima message. I'll be talking more about that at the very end of the presentations. All he had to do was to consecrate Russia to the sorrowful and immaculate heart of Mary, with all of the world's bishops. And there would have been a miracle. But, as in France, under Louis XIV, it wasn't done. Our Lord has specifically requested of Louis XIV, as I've noted, sinful Louis XIV, profligate Louis XIV, to consecrate the whole of France, to have the whole of France consecrated to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Louis XIV refused. The city of Paris was consecrated, but not the entirety of the country of France. That was 1689, and 100 years later, they suffered the consequences as a result. In like manner, we are suffering the consequences today. And what I want to do in this presentation, and perhaps in a few minutes, I'll start a 7th program and then finish it after about 15 minutes, is to explain the other major influence on the world at the beginning of the 20th century, with which the counterfeit Church of Conciliarism eventually made its own reconciliation and continues to make its reconciliation today. If you think I'm mistaken, you look at Joseph Ratzinger Beda the 16th letter to the people of China, the Catholics of China, on June 29th, 2007. And in 2009, the Vatican issued a compendium to explain the letter because Catholics are still being persecuted by the Red Chinese authorities. All of the compromises made by the Conciliar Vatican with communism, beginning with the Metz Agreement that forbade the mention of communism, any condemnation or mention of it in the so-called Second Vatican Council, in exchange for the participation of Russian Orthodox observers there, engineered by Cardinal Mitterrand, no, not Mitterrand, he was the president of France, but engineered Tisserand, Cardinal Tisserand, and that's not a little tired, so please forgive me, Cardinal Tisserand, and in the city of Metz, and the betrayal of Cardinal Benzenti in 1966, all of the Ostpolitik policy of Paul VI, and despite John Paul II's support for solidarity of l'Equivalenza, the belief that communism had ended when it hadn't, and the apparent collapse of the Soviet Union. And Vladimir Putin, I will point out, was again the president of Russia after having been prime minister of Russia under Dmitry Medvedev, if that's pronounced correctly, that Vladimir Putin was once head of a certain Soviet agency. Was it called the KGB? Yeah. And the end of the Cold War, the supposed end of communism in Russia and in Eastern Europe, permitted the Vatican to send Jesuit missionaries into Russia and into Poland and a few other places to re-educate the people into the revolutionary ways of conciliarism. From one revolution, from the civil revolution to the ecclesiastical revolution. Now, what I want to do here, though, in this presentation, is to discuss the rise of communism. First, by providing a summary of the writings of Karl Marx and making some comparisons to our present day, both civilly and ecclesiastically. Karl Marx was born in Germany. I believe the year was 1818. He died in 1883. I could be off on the year, but I believe it was 1818. And he died in 1883. And he came to a belief of economics and of the study of history based upon economics that reduced human beings to the level of pure matter. This is where naturalism would have to lead. Naturalism would have to lead to the reduction of the human being, to the belief that there is nothing above the human being at all, that we're simply a miscellaneous mass of cells. Now, it is very interesting to note that when Marx and his co-writer Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, 1848 and thereafter, that Karl Marx and Engels were writing at a time in which man believed progress was being made in the world, There was all manner of industrial progress, technological progress. If you understand progress, so-called, put that in perspective, you realize the finite intelligence of man. It took man close to 6,000 years to learn how to build complex industrial machinery. And then to run another 100 years, 200 years after that, to run complex machinery with a little microchip. To store information on data bytes. It took man until the end of the 19th century to learn that God had put waves in the air by which we could communicate. It took man until the early 20th century to learn how to build a machine that could defy the law of gravity and fly in its own power. Fly with machinery, whether propeller or eventually jet propulsion. It took man into the somewhat near the middle of the 20th century, the 1930s, 1940s, to develop rockets. Although they weren't completely unknown, but then into the 1950s to send rockets into outer space. We're pretty dumb. We have finite intelligence. God willed, pure activist intelligence created everything. Everything. Pure activist intelligence created everything as we see it. It's incomprehensible. And everything that we don't see. It's an old saying about, and I'll get into it when I discuss Marx. What I want to do here is to provide a very good, I hope it'll be very good, is to provide a thumbnail description of Marxism, what Marxism is, what Marxism proposes itself to be, and explain that this is when you combine it with Protestantism, Judeo-Masonry, Americanism, the Risorgimento, the Kulturkampf, Nazism, combine it all, you see the devil's hand at work to prepare the way for Antichrist. All right, now, Marx, as a student of history, was very influenced by the philosophy of Georg Friedrich Hegel, Hegel, and a German Enlightenment so-called philosopher. Hegel believed that history was a clash of competing ideas. He believed everything about the world was in process, was in motion. There was evolution of ideas, which would feed into, and then off of, Charles Darwin's belief that there was evolution of the species. The ideology of evolutionism also plays an important role, along with communism, in the 19th century to convince sophisticated theologians, especially German Protestant theologians, but some early modernist Catholic writers as well, into believing that God himself was in the process of becoming, which is what Teilhard de Chardin, in the 20th century, Father Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit evolutionist, believed. It's what truly Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, believes. In a separate series, Conciliarism and Catholicism, I will go into more detail. I've explained in passing here the thought of Ratzinger Benedict, but I will do it in greater detail in my next series, Conciliarism and Catholicism. And then I'll provide you an American government course as well. I intend to keep busy during 2013 as God makes it possible for me to be kept to do this work in addition to my other work. And so in any event, but Hegel believed that history was a clash of competing ideas. There was first what he called the thesis, the original idea. But the thesis contained within itself the seeds of its own internal opposition. So the thesis, the first idea, would give rise to the antithesis, that is, the second idea. The clash between the thesis, the first idea, and the second idea that sprung from within the first idea, that clash of competing ideas would result in the new idea, the synthesis. Ratzinger is always referring to the synthesis of faith. He's a dialectician. He believes in dialectic. First you have the thesis. The thesis contains within itself the seeds of its own internal contradiction. Ratzinger believes truth can contradict itself. So did his mentor, Hans Urs von Balthasar, very much influenced by Hegel. But Ratzinger would nuance that by saying, well, truth is so complex, it's so filled with so many different nuances that it's impossible to understand it at any one time, and therefore dogmatic formulae are tied to the specific historical conditions in which they were made, in which they were pronounced. We have to re-examine them in light of newer circumstances. It's the same way of saying truth contains within itself its own internal contradiction. He would say its own internal refinement. But for Hegel, there was the original idea, and then there was the second idea, the antithesis, the exact opposite. The clash between the first and second idea would produce the third idea, the synthesis. The synthesis would become the new idea. And this dialectical process of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis would continue until ultimately there would be the stage of dialectical idealism, the ultimate goal of human existence, the ultimate stage of human evolution for Georg Hegel was dialectical idealism. That was the ultimate goal, the ultimate stage, the highest stage of dialectical idealism. Now, Karl Marx, as an economic materialist, an economic reductionist, reducing everything to the study of pure economics, like the idea of the dialectic, he believed that, yes, history was indeed a clash of competing ideas, was rather the clash of things. But he rejected Hegel's dialectical idealism. He believed that he was turning Hegel right side up, that Hegel had things wrong. Hegel had the right methodology. There was a dialectic. But for Karl Marx, history wasn't a clash of competing ideas. History was a clash of competing economic classes. And so therefore, Marx was an economic reductionist. He was an atheist. He believed the only thing that existed was matter. If you didn't see it, it didn't exist. But ideas themselves are invisible, are they not? Reminds me of a line I stole during a debate. I attributed it, but it harkened back to a line that a Catholic apologist, I believe in the 1930s, used in debate with a atheist who said that an atheistic doctor who said that he had done much brains. He had done a Catholic, not brain surgeon, but a Catholic surgeon, not a Catholic surgeon, but a surgeon who said that he had opened many bodies, he had never seen a soul. And the Catholic apologist said to the man, "Ever see an idea?" Ideas are intangible. The soul is real, but it's invisible. Ideas are invisible. Our thoughts, our worries, our anxieties, our prayers are invisible. But they're nevertheless real. Marx didn't believe in anything other than the visible world. He believed that man was simply a higher form of animal, the highest form of animal. Plant, animal, man. That's it. Where that left rocks, I don't know. But there was matter. And the only thing that mattered was matter. Therefore, for him, history revolved around matter. Revolved around economics. And all human clash revolved around the division of scarce resources. There were limited resources in the world, and human beings were bound to clash as a result of the inequitable distribution of wealth. So I believe that there was a thesis. First there was slavery, the economic system of slavery, which would give rise to feudalism. And the clash between slavery and feudalism, I'm simplifying here, would give rise to capitalism, simplifying on many other steps. Capitalism became the new thesis. It would give rise to radicalism. The clash between capitalism and radicalism would give rise to socialism, which I'll define for you. And socialism would undergo 5 different specific transformations to reach the stage of what he calls ideal communism. Now, there are many types of socialism. I'm describing for you Marxist, what's become known as Bolshevik socialism, adapted by Vladimir Lenin for the purpose of Russia, the Soviet Union. There are many different types of socialism. Each of it is wrong because Pope Pius XI noted in Quadragesimo Anno on May 15th, 1931, on the 40th anniversary of Pope Leo XIII's Venerable November. I want to make sure about the time here. I think I have another 10 minutes or so. And I'm going to continue on with another brief presentation thereafter. Pope Pius XI noted in Quadragesimo Anno, no one can be a sincere socialist and a true Christian at the same time. You can't be a socialist and a Christian. No such thing. Socialism is opposed to Christianity. There's only one Christianity, Catholicism. So Marx believed, unlike Hegel believed the dialectic would result in the stage of dialectical idealism. Marx believed that the ultimate stage of human existence was ideal communism. And I will go into this in some detail. In the stage of ideal communism, according to Karl Marx, in the stage of ideal communism, history would end, the clash would end, the state would wither away and die, and there would be no further need for clash among men because all of the capitalists will have either been killed or converted and their property confiscated and the wealth derived therefrom distributed equitably according to the principle from each according to his ability, to each according to his ability, to each according to his need. So everything would be distributed equitably. Sound familiar? We're living through this today. Now, Marx said that this dialectic, the stage of ideal communism in which the state would be managed by technocrats, that the stage of ideal communism was inevitable. But that there had to be a push to expedite the evolutionary process. Like the nasty little capitalists weren't going to let go of their capitalism, of their wealth voluntarily, that there would have to be a means to expedite the evolutionary process in order that you could reach the stage of ideal communism. And at the stage of ideal communism, there would be peace on earth because men would have no longer need any to conflict, because men conflict over the inequitable distribution of wealth, and therefore, as long as they had an equitable distribution of wealth, they would be happy. Now, this denies the whole of the reality of the human being. The human being longs for God. Even if two children are given the exact toy at Christmas, brother and sister, two brothers, two sisters, they're given the exact doll, given the exact thing, same thing for Christmas. One is likely to envy the other. I want yours. It's a different color. It's better than mine. Does it only matter? People only conflict over matter? People have conflicted over love. They've conflicted over ideas. They've conflicted over faith. Matter is the only thing that matters? It's a total denial of human nature. I heard a sister, her name was Amata Miller, I believe, at a conference, Brooklyn Catholic Charities Conference, held, I forget where it was held, in Brooklyn, New York, it was Saturday, May 7th, 1983. I was asked to speak in the place of a former professor of mine from St. John's University, who at that time was my chairman in the Department of Government and Politics. I prayed for him every day. He's responsible for my being in college teaching. He wouldn't agree with a word of what I'm saying, but not too much, I'm afraid. But I pray for him every day. He was a great influence on my life, and instead of being a very wealthy attorney, I'm a very impoverished ex-college professor. I wouldn't trade a day, though. I was meant to teach in college. My life's work. It was the path that would lead me eventually to where I would more or less find myself unemployable, and then start my lecture program, this lecture program, which has grown over the years, and where I met my wife nearly 12 years ago, March 11th, 2001, at St. Mary by the Sea Church in Huntington Beach, California. I've been very blessed. But I spoke at this conference, and I had to wait for others to speak. Rembert Weekland spoke. Bill, the conciliar so-called bishop, the boy bishop of Albany, he spoke. I think he retires. He may already have retired. It's coming up for him, I think. I think he was born in 1937, so I think soon. I think he should have been retired last year. I haven't kept up with that. But he's been there for a long time. And then as Sister Amata Miller spoke, and she said the way to make the poor happy is to give them material things. She actually said this. It's pure Marxism. The Holy Family was poor, sister. St. Francis was poor. Many of our saints have lived in holy poverty. They've embraced Lady Poverty like the great Saint of Assisi, who came from a wealthy family and renounced it. Pure Marxism. But Marx believed the human being would be happy and would have no cause for conflict with one another. All war, all conflict would cease if there were an equitable distribution of wealth. If the means of production were placed in the hands of the people, and the people ruled, therefore, everyone would be happy. Of course, as we know, all human conflict is the consequence of original and actual sin. Human beings are prone to conflict as a result of our fallen human nature. And there will always be conflict on earth, no matter how large, how great, or how infrequent, depending upon the state of the souls of men. But Marx denied God, the existence of God, denied the existence